I stood at my son Derek's wedding reception in an upscale hotel ballroom when I overheard my new daughter-in-law, Amber, laughing with her bridesmaids about my low-class factory worker background. Minutes later, she introduced her elegant parents, the Thorntons, claiming old money from Boston. I froze. I recognized them as Frank and Diane Carter, struggling actors from community theater where I volunteered for years. I watched them perform their roles perfectly. My heart pounded as I approached Amber during a quiet moment and whispered 3 devastating words. "Your contract is up." The color drained from Amber's face for just a second, before her expression hardened into something cold and calculated. I pulled her aside to a quiet corridor outside the ballroom, away from the celebration and the jazz band playing behind us. The hallway was lined with tall windows overlooking the city lights, and in that moment, I felt like I was looking at a stranger wearing my daughter-in-law's face. "Listen," I said quietly, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I know Frank and Diane Carter. We performed together in a production of Death of a Salesman 3 years ago at the Riverside Community Theater. Frank played Willie Loman, and I was Charlie. I know about the scar on his left forearm from a childhood bicycle accident. I know Diane has a sister named Patricia who lives in Cleveland. I know they drive a 15-year-old Honda Civic and live in a small apartment on Maple Street." Amber looked at me with eyes that seemed to see straight through me. Then she smiled, and that smile made my blood run cold. "Ernest," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet, "I know exactly who you are and what you care about most. Your son Derek. And if you say one single word about any of this to anyone, I will destroy you and your relationship with him forever." She stepped closer, and I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with something darker, something like triumph. "I have text messages ready to send," she continued. "Messages that will show you made inappropriate advances toward me in the weeks before the wedding. I have witnesses prepared to testify they saw you behaving strangely around me. I have a psychologist who will evaluate the situation and suggest you might be experiencing age-related confusion or worse. Derek will never believe his father over his new bride. No one will." My hands trembled. This was not the reaction I expected. I thought she would panic, beg, try to explain. Instead, she had been ready for this moment. She had planned for it, but I could not stay silent. My son was married to a fraud, surrounded by con artists, and I had to make him see the truth. I walked back into the ballroom, my legs feeling weak beneath me, and found Derek near the cake table, laughing with his college friends. He looked so happy in his charcoal gray tuxedo, his face flushed with joy and champagne. "Derek," I said, touching his shoulder. "Son, I need to talk to you. Right now. It is important." "Dad," he said, glancing at his friends. "Can it wait? I am kind of in the middle of my wedding reception." "No," I said firmly. "It cannot wait." Something in my voice must have convinced him because he excused himself and followed me to a small private room off the main hall. I closed the door and launched into everything. The actors, the fake parents, the community theater, the lies. I explained about Frank's scar, about Diane's sister, about the apartment on Maple Street. I told him about Amber's threats. Derek listened, but his face showed confusion more than concern. He rubbed his temples like he had a headache. "Dad," he said slowly, "have you been drinking? This sounds completely insane." "I have not had a single drink," I insisted. "Derek, you have to believe me. Those are not her real parents. They are actors I know personally. This whole thing is a setup, a scam of some kind." Derek shook his head. "A scam? Dad, Amber comes from one of the oldest families in Boston. I have met her relatives, seen her childhood home, met her friends from private school. You think all of that is fake?" "Yes," I said desperately. "I do not know how deep this goes, but I know Frank and Diane Carter. I know them." Derek sighed deeply. "Look, it has been a long day. You are tired, I am tired. Let us talk about this tomorrow, when everyone has had some rest and can think clearly, okay?" He did not believe me. I could see it in his eyes. He thought I was confused or jealous or having some kind of mental episode. We walked back into the reception together, but the celebration felt hollow now. I watched Amber across the room, and she was watching me too, a slight smile on her perfect face. Then I saw her move. She went to the head table and sat down, her hand to her forehead. Within seconds, bridesmaids surrounded her. She was crying, her shoulders shaking. Derek rushed to her side immediately. "What is wrong?" he asked, kneeling beside her chair. She whispered something in his ear. His face changed. He looked across the room at me, and in his eyes I saw suspicion and hurt. Amber had already begun her counter-narrative, painting me as the villain in some story I did not even know yet. I had walked directly into her trap. By confronting her, I had given her the opening to paint me as unstable, jealous, or paranoid. The problem I tried to solve had just gotten much, much worse. 3 days passed, like 3 years. Derek did not return any of my phone calls. I left messages explaining, pleading, apologizing for the timing but insisting on the truth. Nothing. Radio silence. On the 4th day, I drove to the house Derek and Amber had bought together in the Riverside Hills neighborhood, a modest 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a maple tree in the front yard. Derek answered the door but did not invite me inside. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, looking tired and older than his 34 years. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I need to explain properly," I said. The wedding was chaotic, and I did not express myself well. "Can I please come in?" "Amber does not want you in our house right now," he said quietly. "She told me what you said to her at the wedding, about her parents not being real, about some conspiracy theory. She said you cornered her and said disturbing things, that maybe you are becoming paranoid. Dad, are you okay? Have you been to a doctor recently?" The words hit me like physical blows. She had completely reframed the situation. In her version, I was the problem, the unstable elderly man making bizarre accusations. "Derek, I know this sounds crazy, but please listen. I am going to prove everything to you." I drove straight to the Riverside Community Theater, the small converted warehouse where I had volunteered for 8 years. The current production posters hung in the windows, but I went around back to the storage area where they kept archives. The theater manager, a woman named Carol Peterson, let me search through old programs and photographs. I found them. Production photos from Death of a Salesman, programs listing Frank Carter as Willie Loman and Ernest Holloway, that is me, as Charlie. There was Frank, clear as day. His face younger but unmistakably the same man I had seen at the wedding, pretending to be Bradford Thornton, wealthy Boston businessman. I felt a surge of relief. This was proof. Undeniable, photographic proof that Frank was an actor, not Amber's father. This would clear everything up. I drove to Derek's office at the marketing firm he managed, a sleek building downtown with glass walls and modern furniture. I found him in a conference room reviewing campaign materials with his team. He looked annoyed when I interrupted, but he stepped out to talk to me. I spread the programs and photos on a table in the hallway. "Look," I said, "this is Frank Carter. That is the man who stood at your wedding claiming to be Bradford Thornton. This proves he is an actor." Derek studied the photos for a long moment. Then his face hardened in a way I had never seen before. "Dad, Amber already showed me this. She explained everything." My stomach dropped. "What?" "Her father had a twin brother," Derek said flatly. "His name was also Frank, and he was an actor. He died 10 years ago in a car accident. Amber showed me the obituary, sympathy cards from the funeral, everything. The man in these photos is her uncle who passed away. It is a tragic coincidence that you happen to know him, but it does not mean her father is an imposter. It means you knew her late uncle." The ground seemed to tilt beneath my feet. She had already prepared for this. She had woven a story, created fake documents, built a counter-narrative that explained away the evidence before I even presented it. "No," I said weakly. "That is not right. I know Frank Carter. I spoke to him 6 months ago at a theater event. He is not dead. Derek pulled out his phone and showed me an obituary website. There it was. Frank Carter, beloved brother and actor, died in an automobile accident. There were photos, dates, everything that looked official. Someone made that up, I insisted. Derek, please, think about this logically. I need you to stop, Derek said, his voice breaking. This obsession is tearing our family apart. Amber is scared of you. She thinks you might be having some kind of mental health crisis. Maybe you should talk to someone. Get checked out. Memory issues can be serious at your age. He walked away from me, back into his conference room, leaving me standing alone with my useless evidence scattered on the table. But I could not give up. I spent the next week investigating deeper. I discovered Amber had created an elaborate false background. Social media profiles going back 8 years, showing her at private schools in Massachusetts, at country club events, at charity galas. Photos of her with people who claimed to be childhood friends, all vouching for her wealthy upbringing. Every piece looked authentic. I found the address the Thorntons had given as their home address. It was a beautiful mansion in an exclusive gated community 40 minutes outside the city. I drove there one afternoon, determined to confront Frank and Diane directly. The gate guard let me through when I said I was visiting the Thorntons. I parked in front of the massive brick house with white columns and manicured gardens. Frank answered the door, still in character, looking distinguished in expensive casual clothes. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice cultured and completely different from the casual tone I remembered from rehearsals. "Frank, stop this," I said quietly. "I know who you are. Why are you doing this?" His face showed polite confusion. "I am sorry, but I think you have me confused with someone else. My name is Bradford Thornton. If you do not leave, I will have to call the police." Diane appeared behind him, also perfectly in character as the elegant Eleanor Thornton. She looked at me with concern, as if I were a confused elderly stranger. "Frank," I said, getting desperate. "Remember the night we practiced the restaurant scene 15 times because you could not get the blocking right? Remember when your daughter graduated high school and you brought cupcakes to rehearsal to celebrate? Frank, please, this is wrong." "Sir, you need to leave now," Frank said firmly. "You are clearly disturbed." In my frustration, my voice rose. "I am not disturbed. You are lying. You are part of some scam." A neighbor heard the commotion and looked out. Diane stepped to the door and called out that everything was fine, just a confused man who seemed lost. She suggested someone call the police to help me find my way home. Minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers approached, and Frank and Diane explained, calmly and with great concern, that this elderly man had been harassing them with bizarre accusations. They said I seemed delusional, that they were worried about me. I tried to explain about the theater, about the wedding, about everything, but I sounded exactly like what they were describing. A paranoid old man making wild claims about actors and conspiracies. The officers suggested I go home and maybe talk to someone about what I was experiencing. They did not arrest me, but they did make it clear I should not return to this property. That evening, Derek called. His voice was cold and formal. "Dad, the Thorntons called me. They said you showed up at their house making accusations and threatening them. The police were involved. What is wrong with you?" "Derek, they are lying. They are actors. I know them. You need help," he said, and I could hear him crying now. "I do not know what is happening to you, but this needs to stop. I need space from you. Do not call me. Do not come to my house. Do not contact Amber. I think you need to see a doctor. Maybe something is wrong that you do not even realize. Son, please." "Goodbye, Dad." The line went dead. I had found evidence, confronted the imposters, done everything I could think of to prove the truth. But each action had made things worse. Now I was isolated, my credibility destroyed, and Derek thought I was mentally ill. Amber had turned my own son completely against me. 2 months crawled by. 2 months of silence from Derek, of sitting alone in my small house, the same house where Derek had grown up, where his mother and I had raised him with love and laughter. The walls felt like they were closing in. I tried to distract myself with work at the factory where I had spent 37 years operating machinery. But even my coworkers had heard something was wrong. They asked gentle questions about Derek, about whether I was doing okay. Their kindness hurt worse than their silence would have. Then Harold Finch called. Harold owned a small printing business downtown, and we had been friends since high school. His voice sounded uncertain on the phone. "Ernest," he said, "I probably should not mention this, but something has been bothering me. You know I do not like to get involved in family business, but I feel like I need to tell you something." "What is it, Harold?" "I did some rush work last week for Derek's wife. She needed letterhead designed and legal documents printed. High-quality paper, embossed seals, the whole professional setup. It was for estate planning," she said. "But Ernest, the amounts listed on those documents, they seemed wrong, too high. And she was very specific about rushing the order, very secretive about it." My blood went cold. Estate planning. Derek had inherited a trust fund from his mother, my late wife Sarah, who passed away 6 years ago from cancer. The trust was worth $400,000. It was everything Sarah had saved over her lifetime, her inheritance from her own parents, insurance money, everything she had worked for. The trust became fully accessible to Derek at age 35. Derek would turn 35 in less than 3 months. I thanked Harold and hung up. My hands were shaking. This was not just about embarrassing Derek or isolating him from me. This was about money. Amber was after Derek's inheritance. I could not go to Derek directly. He would not listen. I needed professional help. I spent money I really could not afford and hired a private investigator named Ray Tomlin. Ray was in his 50s, a former police detective who now ran his own investigation business. I showed him everything I had, told him everything I knew. Ray worked fast. Within 2 weeks, he came back with information that made my stomach turn. "Ernest," he said, sitting in my living room with a thick folder of documents. "Your instincts were right. Amber has been systematically isolating Derek from everyone in his life. Old college friends, former co-workers, his tennis league buddies. She has convinced him they are all jealous of his success or have ulterior motives. She has gotten him to refinance the house they bought together, adding her name to the deed. She has been added to all his bank accounts. And, last week, Derek signed papers restructuring his marketing firm to include her as 50% co-owner. But that is not all," Ray continued, pulling out more papers. I dug deeper into Amber's background. Her real name is Amanda Briscoe. She has a record in 2 other states: fraud, identity theft, confidence schemes. She has done this before, Ernest. She targets men from families with money, marries them quickly, gains control of their assets, and then vanishes. Relief flooded through me. This was real evidence. Criminal records, proof of prior fraud. Derek would have to believe this. But then Ray held up his hand. "There is a problem. Most of this information I obtained through methods that are not exactly legal. Database searches that required access I should not have. Surveillance that crossed some lines. If you present this to Derek or try to use it in court, it could backfire badly. It might even get me arrested, and the information would be inadmissible. Worse, it could make the situation much harder to prove legally." "What am I supposed to do?" I asked. Ray thought for a moment. "Present it carefully. Do not mention me or how you got it. Just send it to Derek as concerned information you came across. Maybe he will investigate on his own, through proper channels." I spent 2 days organizing everything into a professional package. I included printouts of Amanda Briscoe's arrest records, newspaper articles about her previous fraud cases, timelines showing her pattern of behavior. I wrote a heartfelt letter to Derek explaining that I loved him, that I was not crazy or paranoid, that I just wanted him to look at this information with an open mind. I mailed it to his office, hoping to reach him before Amber could intercept it. 3 days later, I got my answer. A sheriff's deputy knocked on my door and handed me legal papers. Amber had filed for a restraining order against me. The petition claimed I had engaged in persistent harassment, invasion of privacy through hiring investigators to stalk her, and had made her fear for her physical safety. There was a court hearing scheduled for the following week. Derek had received the package, but Amber had been with him when he opened it. She had photographed everything, documented it all, and immediately called her lawyer. At the hearing, I sat alone at the respondent's table. I could not afford a lawyer, so I represented myself. Amber sat at the petitioner's table with a well-dressed attorney named Marcus Brighton, who looked like he cost $300 an hour. Amber took the stand. She looked fragile and frightened in a conservative blue dress. She testified that I had become obsessed with her since the wedding, that I had made bizarre accusations about her family, shown up at her parents' home making threats, and now had hired someone to investigate her private life. She cried when she described how unsafe she felt, how she worried I might become violent. Her lawyer presented the package I had sent as evidence of my obsession. He argued that the information was obtained illegally and represented stalking behavior. He showed photos of me parked outside Derek's house, photos I did not even know existed. He painted me as an unstable, potentially dangerous old man who could not accept his son's marriage. When it was my turn to speak, I tried to explain about the fraud, about Amanda Briscoe's criminal record, about the fake parents, but I had no lawyer to guide me, no way to properly present evidence. Every time I mentioned the investigation, I sounded like I was admitting to stalking. Every time I talked about the actors, I sounded delusional. The judge, a woman in her 40s named Judge Patricia Hendricks, listened patiently. Then she made her ruling. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "I understand you believe you are trying to protect your son, but the methods you have used are inappropriate and potentially illegal. The evidence you have presented is questionable at best, and your behavior has caused genuine distress to the petitioner. I am granting a temporary restraining order. You must stay at least 500 feet away from Amber Holloway and from Derek Holloway. You may not contact them directly or indirectly. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place pending a full hearing in 60 days. The gavel came down. I was now legally barred from approaching my own son. I walked out of the courthouse into bright afternoon sunshine that felt wrong, too cheerful for the moment. In the parking lot, Derek approached me. He was technically violating the restraining order himself by coming within 500 feet of me, but I did not care about that. "Dad," he said, and his voice was full of pain. "Why are you doing this? Why cannot you just be happy for me?" "I am trying to save you," I said, my voice breaking. "Son, please, just look into her background yourself. Verify things independently. That is all I ask." "You had someone investigate my wife," he said. "You violated her privacy, scared her, made her feel unsafe in her own home. I am ashamed of you. I never thought you would become this person." "Derek," I started, but he held up his hand. "I do not want to see you again," he said. "Not until you get help. Not until you can accept my marriage and treat Amber with respect. I mean it, Dad. Stay away from us." He walked to his car, and I watched him drive away. I had lost my son. The restraining order meant I could not call, could not visit, could not even send letters. I was cut off completely, and Derek believed it was my fault. Amber had won every round. My attempt to gather evidence and present it properly had created an even worse problem. Now, I was legally powerless to help my son, even as I knew with absolute certainty that Amber was about to take everything from him. I sat alone in my living room most nights, the television playing but not really watching, surrounded by photos of Derek growing up. Derek at 6 years old, missing his 2 front teeth, holding his first baseball trophy. Derek at 13, awkward and gangly, at his mother's side during a family camping trip. Derek at 22, graduating college, his mother and I so proud we both cried during the ceremony. Sarah had been gone 6 years, but I still felt her absence every single day. She would know what to do. She always knew how to reach Derek when I could not. She had that gift of making him feel heard even when she disagreed with him. 4 months had passed since the restraining order. Derek's 35th birthday came and went. I knew that date by heart. March 14th, the day the trust fund became fully accessible. I wondered if he thought about me on his birthday. I wondered if some part of him missed our tradition of breakfast at Millie's Diner, where we had gone every year since he was 8 years old. Probably not. Amber had likely filled that space with something new, something that excluded me from his life completely. Then, my phone rang. It was Janet Reeves, the trust officer at First National Bank, who had managed Sarah's trust for Derek. Her voice sounded stressed. "Mr. Holloway," she said quietly, "I should not be making this call. If my supervisor found out, I could lose my job. But I thought you should know." "Know what, Janet?" "Derek came in yesterday with his wife. They transferred the entire trust fund into a new joint account, $400,000. The account is set up so that Amber has primary control. She can make withdrawals without Derek's signature, but he cannot withdraw without hers. Mr. Holloway, I have been in banking for 23 years, and something about that transaction felt very wrong. The way she controlled the conversation, the way Derek seemed almost passive, just signing where she told him to sign. I tried to ask him some standard questions about his intentions, and she answered for him. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. She had done it. Amber had gotten control of Sarah's life savings, everything my wife had worked for, everything she wanted to secure Derek's future. "Thank you for telling me, Janet," I managed to say. I know it was a risk. After she hung up, I sat there feeling utterly helpless. Then I called Ray Tomlin, the investigator. Maybe he had found something new, something that could help. Ray's news was even worse than I feared. "Ernest, I have been tracking Amber's pattern like you asked. She has done this twice before. In Ohio 3 years ago, she married a man named Kevin Lassiter. He owned a successful landscaping company. Within 8 months, she had gained control of his business assets and his late mother's inheritance. Then she vanished. Kevin reported her to police, but by the time they investigated, she was gone, and the money had been moved through so many accounts they could not trace it. Kevin ended up in bankruptcy. And before that," Ray continued, "she targeted a man in Pennsylvania named Gregory Walsh. Same pattern. Quick marriage, isolation from family, gaining control of assets, then disappearing. Gregory also filed reports, but she uses false identities, fake documents, accomplices who help create alibis. She is a professional, Ernest. She has probably stolen millions over the years. Can you prove this to Derek?" I asked desperately. "Not legally. Kevin and Gregory would testify. But right now getting anywhere near Derek or Amber violates your restraining order. If I approach them, I could be charged with interfering in an active legal order. We are trapped." I tried one more desperate move. I went to Derek's workplace, the marketing firm where he had worked for 9 years. I stayed 501 feet away, measuring it carefully on my phone's map. I waited in a coffee shop across the street until I saw Tim Sullivan, one of Derek's former colleagues, leaving the building. I caught up with Tim on the sidewalk. He looked surprised to see me. "Mr. Holloway," he said, "how are you?" "Tim, I need your help. I know I am not supposed to contact Derek, but I need you to give him a message. Tell him his trust fund is in danger. Tell him to verify everything Amber has told him about her background. Tell him to call Kevin Lassiter in Ohio. Just give him that name. Will you do that?" Tim looked uncomfortable but finally agreed. He went back inside. I waited for an hour, hoping Derek would come out, hoping this message would be the one that broke through. Tim came back out, shaking his head. "I am sorry, Mr. Holloway. Derek is not there anymore. He quit 3 weeks ago, sold his share of the business to his partner. Amber convinced him to cash out and invest everything in some business opportunity she set up. Nobody here has heard from him since." My legs nearly gave out. Derek had quit his job, given up his career, sold his stake in a business he had spent years building. Amber had not just taken the inheritance, she had dismantled Derek's entire life. That night, I sat in my dark living room, looking at photos of Sarah and Derek. I had failed. Failed as a father. Failed as a protector. Failed to save my son from a predator. Derek was going to lose everything, and when Amber vanished, he would be left with nothing. No money, no career, no family, probably buried in debt from the refinanced house. I thought about Sarah, about what she would say if she were here. She would tell me to keep fighting. She would say that as long as I was breathing, there was still hope, but I could not see any path forward. I was trapped by the restraining order, discredited by my own previous actions, and out of options. My phone rang at 11:30 that night. Unknown number. I almost did not answer. Ernest Holloway? A man's voice said, shaking and scared. Yes. Who is this? It is Frank Carter. Please, do not hang up. I need to meet with you, tonight, right now. Something has gone very wrong, and I am scared. I want to tell you the truth about everything, but we do not have much time. Amber is planning to disappear in 72 hours. If we do not act now, your son is going to lose everything, and I think he might be in danger. My heart hammered. This could be another trap. Frank could be luring me somewhere that would violate the restraining order and get me arrested. If I was in jail, I could not help Derek at all. But what if Frank was telling the truth? What if this was the only chance to save Derek? I had to decide right then. Trust Frank and risk everything, or play it safe and watch my son's life be destroyed. Where do you want to meet? I asked. Frank gave me an address. A diner on the edge of town, all-night place, public enough to be safe. I will be there in 30 minutes, I said. I grabbed my jacket and car keys. This was either the break I needed or the final disaster that would end any chance of saving Derek. But I had run out of safe options months ago. All that was left was taking the risk. The Starlight Diner sat on a lonely stretch of highway outside town, its neon sign flickering against the dark sky. I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot just after midnight. Through the windows, I could see Frank Carter sitting alone in a corner booth, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup. He looked terrible. His face was pale, his hair uncombed, and his eyes darted nervously toward the door every few seconds. I walked in, the bell above the door chiming. Frank looked up and something like relief crossed his face. I slid into the booth across from him. The waitress, a tired woman in her 50s, came over and I ordered coffee. Then I waited for Frank to speak. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I was afraid you would not. Why should I trust you?" I asked. "You lied at my son's wedding. You lied when I came to your house. You helped ruin my relationship with Derek. Why would I trust anything you say now?" Frank's hands were shaking. "Because I did not know what I was getting into. Because I am scared for my daughter. Because this has gone way too far, and I need to make it right before someone gets hurt." He looked over his shoulder at the empty diner, then leaned forward. "Diane and I were hired to play Amber's parents. We were told it was for a social experiment, a documentary project about class perceptions and social dynamics. We were supposed to pretend to be wealthy parents for one weekend. They paid us $5,000 each. For struggling actors like us, that was months of rent. We thought it was harmless. But at the wedding," Frank continued, "I started noticing things that did not add up. The way Amber controlled every conversation with Derek, the way she watched you like a predator watching prey. So I followed her after the reception. I saw her meet with a man at a hotel. They talked about money, about timelines, about you being a problem that had been handled." "Who is the man?" I asked. "His name is Marcus Devane. He is the one really running this operation. Amber works for him. She is one of several women he uses to target wealthy families. They have been doing this for over a decade, Ernest. They have stolen millions from people across multiple states." The waitress brought my coffee. We both stayed silent until she left. "I have been trying to get out," Frank said. "After the wedding, I told Marcus I was done, but he knows where I live. He knows about my daughter, Emily. She is 19, in college at State University. 2 weeks ago, Emily called me. She said a man had been following her on campus, showing up at the library where she studies, sitting behind her in the coffee shop. She thought she was being paranoid, but then he approached her. He knew her name, knew details about our family. He told her to tell her father to stay in character and keep his mouth shut. Frank pulled out his phone and showed me photos. Emily with a man in the background, always watching. Different locations, different days. The same man. Marcus made it clear, Frank said. Play the role, or Emily gets hurt. So Diane and I have been doing what he says, staying in that rented mansion, playing the wealthy Thorntons whenever needed. But Ernest, I cannot do this anymore. Your son is a good person who does not deserve this. And I cannot let my daughter be used as leverage for criminals. What about Diane? I asked. Does she know you are here? Frank shook his head. Diane still thinks this is just an acting job that got complicated. She does not know about Marcus's threats or Emily being followed. If she finds out, she will panic. She cannot know I am talking to you. Do you have proof of any of this? I asked. Frank pulled out a small digital recorder. I have been recording conversations with Marcus and Amber. I have text messages, financial records, showing the payments they made to us. I have photos of Marcus meeting with other women who are probably running the same con on different targets. But Ernest, I am terrified to go to the police. Marcus has connections. He always seems to know what is happening. I think someone in local law enforcement might be helping him. My mind raced. This was the break I needed, but it was also incredibly dangerous. If Marcus found out Frank was talking to me, he would hurt Emily. If we went to the wrong people, Marcus would disappear, and Derek would be left with nothing. We need to go above local police, I said. We need federal law enforcement, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Can you get me copies of your recordings and documents? Yes, but we need to move fast. Amber is meeting with Marcus tomorrow night. I overheard them talking. They are accelerating the timeline. They are leaving in 72 hours instead of the original plan. Derek is supposed to sign some final documents tomorrow that will transfer everything into accounts Marcus controls. Once that is done, they will vanish, and Derek will be abandoned somewhere, probably far from home, so it takes him time to report anything. We need help, I said. I know a private investigator, Ray Tomlin. Can you meet with him tomorrow? Frank nodded. But there is something else. I have been watching Derek lately. Ernest, he does not look good. He seems exhausted, scared, almost like he is being controlled. There was a moment 2 days ago when I was at their house, still playing the father-in-law role. Amber left the room to take a phone call. Derek just sat there, staring at nothing. I asked if he was okay. For just a second, his face showed pure desperation. Then Amber came back, and he was back to normal, or whatever passes for normal now. My son knows something is wrong, I said. He just does not know how to get out. We talked for another hour, planning carefully. Frank would get me copies of all his evidence. We would contact the FBI through channels that would bypass any local corruption. We would move fast, but carefully. The stakes were enormous. My son's life savings, his future, possibly his safety, Frank's daughter's well-being, multiple victims across multiple states. As we were leaving, Frank's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his face went white. What is it? I asked. Text from Marcus. The plan has changed again. They are leaving tomorrow night, not in 72 hours. Derek is being taken somewhere tomorrow afternoon to sign the papers. Once those are signed, Amber and Marcus will be gone within hours. Ernest, we are out of time. We have maybe 24 hours to stop this. We stood in the parking lot under the flickering neon sign. The night air was cold. Two men who did not know each other 3 hours ago, now bound together in a desperate race to save people we loved. Give me everything you have. First thing in the morning, I said. I will contact the FBI immediately. But Frank, if this goes wrong, if Marcus finds out you talk to me, take Emily and run. Do not wait. Just protect your daughter. Frank nodded. Then he said something that stayed with me. I am an actor, Ernest. I have played dozens of roles. But I never thought I would have to play the hero in a real-life situation where real people get hurt. I am terrified, but I have to do this. For my daughter. For your son. For every person Marcus and Amber have destroyed. We shook hands and drove off in different directions. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table, drinking coffee and watching the clock, waiting for morning so I could make the calls that would either save my son or lose him forever. At 6 in the morning, I called Ray Tomlin. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the early hour. I told him everything Frank had said. Ray did not hesitate. "Contact FBI Special Agent Lisa Brennan," he said. "She handles financial fraud and organized crime in this region. I have worked with her before on cases. She is solid, not corrupt, and she moves fast when she needs to." I called the FBI field office at 7. By 8, I was sitting in a small conference room with Agent Brennan and 2 other agents. Frank arrived 15 minutes later with a thick envelope of evidence. Agent Brennan was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and professional. She listened to everything without interrupting, reviewed Frank's recordings and documents, and asked precise questions. When we finished, she sat back and studied us both. "This is enough to build a case," she said. "Marcus Devane is known to us. We have been trying to connect him to fraud operations in 4 states. But I need more than recordings and documents. I need to catch them in the act of fraud. I need your son to cooperate, Mr. Holloway." My heart sank. Derek thinks I am delusional and dangerous. There is a restraining order keeping me away from him. He will not listen to me. Agent Brennan considered this. "What time is Derek supposed to sign these final documents?" Frank checked his phone. "According to what I overheard, 2 in the afternoon. At First National Bank downtown. Amber is taking him there to complete the transfers." Agent Brennan looked at me. "Mr. Holloway, you need to approach your son before he goes into that bank. You need to convince him to wear a wire and draw out Amber's explicit confession of fraud. It is risky. If you are caught violating the restraining order, you will be arrested. But it is the only way to get enough evidence to make arrests that will hold up in court. If I get arrested, I cannot help Derek at all. If you do nothing, Marcus and Amber disappear with everything your son has, and Derek is left destroyed. Your choice." It was no choice at all. I would risk everything for one chance to save my son. Agent Brennan's team worked fast. They placed agents near Derek's house to track when he left. They positioned surveillance at the bank. They prepared a wire for Derek to wear. Everything had to go perfectly. At 1:30, I got the call. Derek just left his house. He is heading downtown toward the bank. He should arrive around 1:50. I drove to the bank, my hands sweating on the steering wheel. I parked where I could see the entrance. At 1:53, I saw Derek's car pull into the lot. Amber was in the passenger seat. They sat there for a moment, talking. Then Derek got out alone and started walking toward the bank entrance. I got out of my car and walked toward him, my heart hammering. He saw me and stopped. His face showed anger and fear. "Dad, what are you doing? You are not supposed to be near me. I will call the police." "Derek," I said, speaking fast. "Please, just give me 60 seconds. That is all I ask. 60 seconds, and then I will leave if you want me to." Something in my voice must have reached him because he did not walk away. Amber was watching from the car, but she had not gotten out yet. "Your wife is not who she says she is," I said. "Her real name is Amanda Briscoe. She is part of an organized fraud operation run by a man named Marcus Devane. They have done this to other men in other states." Frank Carter, the man playing her father, came forward. He has been recording everything. The FBI is involved. "Derek, your entire inheritance is about to be stolen. Everything your mother saved for you is about to disappear." Derek's face went through several emotions. Anger, confusion, and then something broke. His shoulders sagged and his eyes filled with tears. "I know," he whispered. "God help me, Dad, I know." "What?" "Something is wrong. I have known for weeks, maybe months. The way she controls everything, watches me constantly, isolates me from everyone. She has told me things, terrible things. She said if I ever try to leave or tell anyone that she is not who she claims, she will destroy me. She has fabricated evidence that I have been abusive to her. She has witnesses ready to lie. She will ruin me professionally and personally. I have been trapped, Dad. I did not know how to get out. I was too ashamed to admit I was fooled so completely. I grabbed his arms. You are not fooled. You are a victim. And we can stop this right now. But I need you to trust me. The FBI is here. They need you to wear a wire and get Amber to confess on tape. Can you do that? Derek looked terrified, but he nodded. Agent Brennan and a technician appeared from an unmarked van. They quickly fitted Derek with a small recording device hidden under his shirt. They gave him instructions on how to get Amber to incriminate herself. Ask questions about the money. Get her to explain the plan. Make her feel safe enough to tell the truth. You can do this, I told my son. Your mother would be so proud of your courage. Derek walked toward the bank, his posture stiff with fear. Amber got out of the car and joined him. They walked inside together. Agent Brennan and I moved to the surveillance van, where we could hear everything through Derek's wire. Inside the bank, Derek began the process. Amber stood close to him, controlling everything. We heard Derek speak. Amber, he said, his voice shaking. Before we do this, I need to understand something. Where is this money actually going? You said it is for an investment opportunity, but I need to know the details. Amber's voice came through clear and cold. Derek, we have talked about this. Stop questioning everything. Just sign the papers. I need to know, Derek insisted. This is $400,000. My mother's entire life savings. I need to understand where it is going and why you need it all in your name. There was silence for a moment. Then Amber's voice changed, became softer, almost seductive. Baby, you know I love you, right? This is all for us, for our future. Marcus has set up investment accounts offshore, where the money will grow much faster than in a domestic bank. But it needs to be in my name, for tax purposes. Once it is transferred, we will have access to incredible returns. You trust me, do not you? Who is Marcus? Derek asked. You have never mentioned him before. Another pause. We could hear papers rustling. He is a financial advisor I have worked with for years, Amber said carefully. He specializes in high net worth clients. Derek, why are you asking all these questions? Then, everything went wrong. The bank door opened, and a man walked in. Agent Brennan looked at a screen showing bank surveillance and swore under her breath. That is Marcus Devane, she said. He is not supposed to be there. Through the wire, we heard Marcus speak. Amber, we need to go. Now. What? Why? We are almost done here. There are FBI agents outside. Someone talked. We need to leave right now. My blood ran ice cold. How did Marcus know? How did he figure it out so fast? Then Marcus's voice again, hard and threatening. Derek, give me the wire you are wearing. My son's terrified breathing came through the speaker. I do not know what you are talking about. Give me the wire, or I will shoot everyone in this bank. Right now. The bank erupted in screams. Customers hit the floor. Tellers ducked behind counters. Agent Brennan was already moving, shouting orders into her radio. FBI, move in now. Active threat at First National Bank. I could not think, could not breathe. I ran toward the bank entrance, every instinct screaming at me to get to my son. Agent Brennan shouted for me to stop, but I did not care. Derek was in there with a violent criminal who had just threatened to shoot people. I pushed through the bank doors. The scene was chaos. People on the floor, crying and screaming. Marcus Devane stood near the counter, holding Amber in front of him like a shield. In his other hand was a handgun, pointed at the ceiling but ready to aim anywhere. He saw me enter, and his eyes went wide with recognition. You, he said, you are the father. You are the one who ruined everything. Let my son go, I said, walking slowly forward with my hands raised. This is between you and me. Let Derek go." Derek was frozen against a wall, his face white with terror. FBI agents were rushing into the bank behind me, weapons drawn, shouting commands. "Get down on the ground. Drop the weapon. Hands where we can see them." Marcus backed toward a side door, dragging Amber with him. She was screaming now, realizing she was being used as a human shield, that Marcus saw her as disposable. "It is over, Marcus," Agent Brennan shouted. "The building is surrounded. There is nowhere to go." For terrible seconds, I thought Marcus would start shooting. His finger was on the trigger, his eyes wild with desperate calculation. Then Amber, in a sudden burst of survival instinct, bit down hard on his arm and threw herself sideways. Marcus's grip broke. FBI agents rushed forward. He swung the gun toward them, but 3 agents fired simultaneously. Marcus went down. The gun skittered across the tile floor. Agents swarmed him, shouting commands, securing the weapon. Amber collapsed on the floor, sobbing hysterically. Derek stood against the wall, shaking so badly I thought he might fall. I crossed the distance between us and pulled him into my arms. "I got you," I said. "I got you. You are safe." Derek held on to me like he had when he was a little boy having nightmares, and he cried into my shoulder. Outside, we learned that the associate Marcus had sent to watch Frank's daughter Emily had been arrested by other FBI agents. Emily was safe. Marcus Devon was injured but alive, in custody, and facing federal charges that would put him away for decades. Amber was arrested for fraud, conspiracy, and multiple other charges. The danger was over. But as Derek and I sat on the curb outside the bank, surrounded by police cars and ambulances and chaos, I knew the real work was just beginning. My son's life had been torn apart, his trust destroyed, his savings nearly stolen, his career abandoned, his sense of self shattered. But he was alive, and we were together. And sometimes, that is enough to start rebuilding from. 3 weeks after the arrests, Derek sat with me in my small living room, the same room where he had played with toy trucks as a child, where we had watched football games together, where Sarah and I had taught him to play chess. He looked like he had aged a decade. His face was thinner, his eyes shadowed, and his movements carried a careful quality, like someone recovering from a serious injury. "I am sorry," he said for the 100th time. "Dad, I am so sorry for everything I said, for believing her over you, for the restraining order, for shutting you out." I reached over and took his hand. "Derek, you were the victim of professional criminals. They are experts at manipulation. This is not your fault." "But I should have known," he insisted. "I should have seen the signs. I am supposed to be smart. I ran a business. How did I let this happen?" "Because she was good at what she does," I said gently. "And because you wanted to believe someone loved you. That is not a weakness, son. That is being human." The FBI investigation had revealed the full scope of Marcus Devane's operation. His network had defrauded 17 families across 8 states over 12 years. The total stolen was over $9 million. Amber, whose real name was Amanda Briscoe, was one of 5 women working for him. They targeted men from families with inheritances, insurance settlements, or business assets. The methods were always similar: quick romance, fast marriage, isolation from family and friends, gain control of assets, then disappear. Derek would get back most of his money. The FBI had frozen accounts and seized assets. He would recover about $320,000 of the $400,000. The rest was gone, spent or hidden in accounts they could not trace. But compared to what could have happened, compared to the complete destruction Amber had planned, he was lucky. Still, the money was not the real damage. The real damage was what Amber had done to Derek's sense of trust, his confidence in his own judgment, his ability to believe in people. He started therapy 3 times a week, with a psychologist who specialized in trauma and manipulation. Dr. Helen Garrett helped Derek understand coercive control, how Amber had systematically broken down his defenses, isolated him from support systems, and made him doubt his own perceptions. It had a name. Intimate partner abuse through psychological manipulation. I attended some sessions with Derek. We talked about things we had never discussed. My loneliness after Sarah died. Derek's guilt about not being there enough for me during that time. Our failure to communicate openly about our fears and needs. The distance that had grown between us, even before Amber appeared. One afternoon, a month after the arrests, Frank Carter called and asked if he could visit. I said yes. He showed up at my door with Diane, both looking nervous and ashamed. "We need to apologize," Frank said. "We took money to lie for criminals. We helped destroy your family. There is no excuse for that." I invited them in. We sat in the living room, and I listened as they explained again how they had been deceived initially, then threatened and trapped. Diane cried as she described how scared she had been for Emily, how helpless Frank had felt. "You came forward when it mattered," I said finally. "You risked your daughter's safety to tell the truth. Frank, you saved my son's life. I forgive you both." Frank's face crumpled with relief. "His daughter Emily wants to meet you someday," he said. "She wants to thank the man who her father says has more courage than anyone he has ever met." We became unlikely friends after that. Frank and Diane returned to community theater, and I started volunteering there again. We performed together in a production of Our Town that fall. The local newspaper did a story about our friendship, about how something good came from something terrible. Derek moved back in with me temporarily while he rebuilt his life. The house that had felt empty and haunted for years suddenly filled with sounds again. Derek cooking breakfast in the morning, the television on in the evening, conversations over dinner. It reminded me of when he was young, when Sarah was still alive, when our family felt whole. He reconnected with friends Amber had driven away. His former business partner, Tim Sullivan, reached out, and they talked for hours. Tim offered Derek a consulting position at the marketing firm. Derek was not ready for full-time work yet, but the consulting gave him structure and purpose. One evening, about 2 months after everything, Derek and I sat on the back porch as the sun set. The fall air was cool and filled with the smell of leaves. Derek had been quiet all day, thinking about something. "Dad," he said finally, "how did you keep fighting? When everyone thought you were crazy, when I turned against you, when you had that restraining order. How did you not give up?" I thought about Sarah, about what she would say. "Your mother used to tell me that love means fighting for people even when they push you away, even when it costs you everything, even when it looks impossible. She believed that truth always finds a way through the darkness, if you refuse to give up on it." "I miss her," Derek said quietly. "I wish she was here. She would know what to say to make this all feel less overwhelming." "She is here," I said. "In both of us. In the way we refuse to give up on each other. In the way we are sitting here together now, still fighting to rebuild. That is her legacy." Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "What do you think the lesson is? From all of this? There has to be something we can learn." I considered carefully. Con artists succeed because they exploit people's desire to be loved and accepted. Amber made you feel special, chosen, worthy. But Derek, real love does not isolate you from the people who have always been there. Real love does not make you doubt yourself or feel controlled. Real love builds you up and keeps you connected to your roots. Remember that. For the rest of your life, remember that. "Can you forgive me?" Derek asked, his voice breaking. "For the things I said at the wedding, for the restraining order, for shutting you out?" I took his hand. "Son, there is nothing to forgive. You were a victim of sophisticated criminals. The only thing that matters is we found our way back to each other. That is all your mother would care about. That we are family again." Derek started dating cautiously the following spring. Therapy had helped him recognize healthy relationship patterns. He moved slowly, carefully, learning to trust his instincts again, while also being open to connection. He met a woman named Rachel, who worked as a teacher. She was patient and kind, and most importantly, she encouraged his relationship with me. She joined us for dinners, asked questions about Sarah, welcomed becoming part of our small family. I retired from the factory that year. 37 years of operating machinery, of steady work and honest labor, came to an end. But I started volunteering more at the community theater, finding joy in the artistic community. Frank and I performed together regularly. People who knew our story would come up after shows and tell us we were an inspiration. The criminal trials took months. Marcus Devane was convicted on 17 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and multiple other charges. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Amanda Briscoe, the woman we knew as Amber, cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for a lighter sentence. She received 8 years and would be eligible for parole in 5. The other women, in Marcus's network, also faced charges. Many of their victims came forward, forming a support network for people recovering from romantic fraud and financial exploitation. Derek eventually spoke publicly about his experience at a community forum about elder financial abuse and romantic fraud. He stood at a podium, his voice steady despite his obvious nerves, and told his story. He warned others about the signs: isolation from family, rapid relationship progression, financial control, threats, and manipulation. Several people came up afterward to thank him, to say his courage helped them recognize situations in their own lives. My son had turned his pain into purpose. Sarah would have been so proud. One Saturday afternoon in the spring, Derek and I worked together in my backyard building a wooden bench. We had talked about creating something in memory of Sarah, and a bench felt right. A place to sit and remember, solid and lasting. As we worked side by side, measuring and cutting and sanding, I felt Sarah's presence in the warm afternoon air, the smell of fresh-cut wood, the sound of birds in the trees, the simple satisfaction of creating something real with my hands and with my son beside me. "This will last," Derek said, running his hand along the smooth wood. "Long after we are gone, this bench will still be here. Just like the truth we fought for," I said. "It cost everything, but it was worth it." Derek looked at me, and his eyes were clear now, healed in ways that had seemed impossible months ago. "Thank you for not giving up on me, Dad. Thank you for fighting when I could not. That is what family does," I said simply. We finished the bench as the sun set. It sat solid and real in my backyard, a memorial to Sarah and a symbol of everything Derek and I had survived together. We would sit on it many times in the years to come, talking about life and loss and love, and the courage it takes to stand in truth, even when standing alone. The bench is still there today, a reminder that family is worth fighting for, that truth always costs something, but lies cost everything, and that love, real love, is the courage to stand in truth, even when everyone thinks you are crazy, even when you lose everything, even when hope seems impossible, because sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing, and sometimes refusing to give up on someone is the greatest act of love there is. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to fight for someone you love, even when they pushed you away? Have you ever stood alone defending a truth that everyone else thought was crazy? How did you find the courage to keep going? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story moved you, or made you think about the power of family and truth, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and finding the strength to overcome. And please share this with someone who needs to hear that giving up is never the answer when it comes to the people we love. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that no matter how dark things seem, no matter how alone you feel, love and truth are always worth fighting for. Stay strong, stay connected to the people who matter, and never stop believing in the power of family.